Zbrush. Okay, we are live. Hey everyone. Thanks for joining the stream. If you're here. Yeah, today we're gonna be doing a chill sesh. I've already done my creature sketch for the day, so gonna be doing in Zbrush, doing some stuff in Zbrush a little bit more because it's been a little while since I've been in here. This is a piece, actually, hold up real quick before we get started too far. Let me go ahead and just so I don't get like flagged anywhere, let's go ahead and give this guy pants. Just so it, we're not getting flagged for anything, just in case. I think we'd be all right, but I don't know that for sure. So we're gonna go ahead and just give him pants. Project. Whoops, not project. Whoops, not what I was doing. It's been a little while. That was dumb. Make sure I don't. Oh, okay, yeah. This one, 0 thick. No thick. Double? I don't think so. Or double off. For that. Oh, actually, whoop. Hold up, damn, it's been a while messing up on simple Zbrush stuff. Okay, so now we have these pants. Go ahead and just take this piece right here and gonna move this up here. There you go. Quick tutorial on how to make some shorts. And then do some Z remesher on this. We're gonna go half on the Z remesher. Can you see it on the thing? Yeah. Make sure to try to keep my settings visible in ZBrush. Also have music today. If music is too loud or any issues with the music, just let me know and I will take care of that. But yeah, keeping it very chill today. Cool. I did a half Z remesh right there, so we get the topology just a little bit cleaner and easier to work with for stuff like this. I like to just honestly make it as low as you can. Yeah, that's something like that's good. I'm cool with that. Make that some shorts right there. Hide that because that feels like that will get flagged. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So just a little detour real quick as I was sitting here and just thought about it, and so I was like, let's fix this while we can. Before we get flagged for anything by some AI content. Let's turn this way down, not the move. Let's turn the smooth way down. Just want to smooth that out. Shouldn't be any indent here. Okay, cool. That's good enough. We're not going to keep these real. The camera is blocking my side panel, so I don't think you can see it on the stream anyway, but I can barely see it in person either, so it works out. It ends up being pretty good. Cool. Let's just fix these. Yeah, gotta make your shorts a little shorter. Can't have anything more than a 7-inch inseam on shorts. That's the rule. Cool. So okay, make sure mic is good. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. So we have some little quick shorts that I did just to keep those from getting in trouble for any reason at all. Cool. Smooth. There we go. Cool. Shorts. Okay. Cool. Now sidetrack completely. That's ADHD in progress. Let me go ahead and save this since this is the main one. You can't see that. Okay, cool. Awesome. That I was hoping that would prevent my little dialog boxes coming up so you guys don't see all my messy file system that I have. Atom Beta Unified. Cool. Okay. Look at that good. Slurp ASMR. My water. Okay, cool. So right now we okay, yeah, focus. Okay, so for what we have today, I'm gonna be doing something pretty chill because I already did my creature sketch of the day So we're not doing that on stream, and we've been doing a lot of 2D stuff. So I do want to get back into 3D, because that is still what the goal is. I think at the end of the day with the art pipeline, I think 3D is where I feel like the finished products are, for the most part. And the way I feel is 2D feeds the 3D, or should. That's kind of why I started learning how to draw in general. So yeah, so for this 3D piece I've been working on here for a while. This has been part of a bigger project that I've been working on for a while. This is my base mesh that I've been working on for my pipeline. I do want to, it's something I've been working on in Unreal for a bit, and that's where I've been trying to get this loaded in there, and I do have it loaded in there a little bit. I can show that at some point if we want to, but yeah, so the idea for this piece specifically here was to make a base character that I can load into Unreal, and the way I can manipulate them in Unreal and do more things with them in Unreal. So it's going to be whether it's animation or just, you know, textures, anything, just rendering. I wanted to have Unreal as kind of the playground, because before I would mainly work in you know, the pipeline to be Zbrush, Blender, Unwrap, Texture, and Substance Painter, and then just render in Blender again with cycles, which is good, and it worked, and that's where most of my pieces are. But I did always like to build with animation in mind, even though I never really did animation. I do a little bit. I know how to do it, kind of. I know how to make it passable, I guess. I can do it if I need to. But a lot of times it would stop at really simple animations, and just kind of the characters would sit in their own little space in my stuff. So I didn't really love that, because it feels like there's not really, there's Morgan Freeman just mogging you on the art level whenever you take too long for your stuff. Yeah, so the way it would work basically is, yeah, Blender, or ZBrush to Blender, and do everything in Blender after that. It's besides texturing and Substance Painter. So it's cool. It would kind of end at Blender though. You end at the Blender render, and then scenes you can make scenes in Blender, but they felt very static. Like you're making it for one time, kind of more like an art piece, like when you do traditional 2D stuff. So there is merit to that, and I think most of my cool stuff has been in Blender anyway. So I don't hate the workflow, but I always was missing that, like, almost like we have an action figure. You didn't get to play with it really. You get to do a little bit, and you get to do stuff, but you don't get to, like, you know, take action figures and just make them like do stuff together. And that's something I've been wanting to expand on a little bit more for a while, and to have a unified place where everything can mesh together. So if I have one character that's really cool, or I made something really cool for a character, I want to have it in Unreal or in some area where they can all kind of interact. And you can do that in Blender too, and I just, you know, never set up that way. But I like the idea of building something to be in a pipeline that leads to a real-time environment, because I feel like that's also a useful skill to have. Like when you make video games and things like that, your end pipeline usually ends up being the game or the finished product. And so if you make a character that's like a Kratos, or like a, you know, something like in Cyberpunk, like Johnny Silverhand and things like that, I like the idea of being able to make them interact and then being able to do things with them. Part of the other piece that I'm working on for this pipeline is that I want it to be something that I just realized I need to charge my phone. I want it to be something that is a pipeline that I can use to learn. AirPods 4, I don't know which AirPods those are. So I can use this pipeline to both learn how to get something into the real-time game engine environment, and also to have a pipeline that I can just utilize to make things quickly. Because a lot of times when I would do something, I ended up starting from scratch every time, which is good for learning, good for studies and things like that. But if you make a character, you know, a standard male character, you can really make a base mesh that has all the pieces in it, kind of like what MetaHuman does, kind of like, and this does, I think, utilize some MetaHuman elements. And ideally, I've been working with my own skeleton. I may switch now. They've had some updates to the MetaHuman workflow. You can use it with more custom topology. This is not the metahuman topology, and I may have based it off of it at some point. It's been a little while since I've done this, but at this point I've definitely customized pieces of it. Let me see if I can actually not control the shift F. There you go. Yeah, so I redid. I've definitely, I think I started from maybe a base mesh. Maybe it was the metahuman base mesh. It's been a little while, like, since I think it's probably the metahuman base mesh that I started from for this. But I wanted it to make a piece that could be modular. So just because I like the idea of, like, even in a game, you can be able to switch, limbs and things like that, and then have things that you can, like, cut off limbs and things like that. So that was part of this project, but also modular, so I can just have something that works well and set up and hooked up the right way with the right UVs and things like that, and I can switch out pieces from a character. Like, say I wanted to make a character without an arm. That's kind of what this is testing. I wanted to have this set up so I could take my base mesh character and be like, I'm going to make a cyberpunk character, so I want to be able to turn his arm off and be able to replace it with another limb, and switch it out based on these seams and things like that. So that was the original intent of this piece, was to create something that I could make modular and turn things on and off. Like, if I want to keep the body all the same but just turn off the head, I have separated the head out into a piece, and then in Unreal I've already kind of done the work where I've separated everything into separate pieces, so we can take the same body and then just put different heads on it. So if we want, oops, let's put that back on. If we want to, use this as the base body, but I want to do a different head, I want to make one head old, one head young, whatever. As long as I keep these seams the same, I can sculpt on this head, do everything I want to do, and then just connect at these seams for the character. And same thing with the cybernetics. If I want characters to be able to, turn their limbs off for cybernetics, well, as long as I build at this with this seam in mind, if I come down to the lowest, yeah. And right now it's really rough. This is just a little concept piece right here, but I wanted to be able to turn this seam off that I've already defined, and defined my UVs and things like that. Turn this seam off, switch it with this cybernetic limb here, and that way, if I use the same default mesh, any character that uses this default mesh technically has the setup to use this alternate limb. And ideally, if I design everything around this limb system and it matches up on all these things, then I can do this with any limb. I can, as long as it connects to the seam, I can turn it off and on right here at these points that I've defined already. Also for clothing and things like that, like if I want something to have like a short sleeve shirt, well, I don't need any of this torso here. I can go ahead and just turn this torso off and then have the shirt underneath, and I still have the neck line and then the arms or whatever from the short sleeve, but the torso isn't in there anymore to actually be used or rendered or anything like that. And technically, like, if this piece I have shorts, I don't need this piece here because the shorts are covering it up, and we can kind of see where the shorts, why that seam works, where I put it there. Technically, I've seen others, like J Hill has a pretty good explanation on how he built his base mesh, and he built his seams a little weirder than I kind of would have thought to do. But he's been in the game industry for a while and been in the industry to do to understand what he's doing. Obviously more than I have, because I have not been in. But his seams come in at the shoulder, like all the way down here, and he did that, I think, because of it's like they come down here and then like at the shoulder, like right in here. I think he said that in one of his videos that I watched, he said that he did that for like tank tops and things like that, because you're gonna see some of this up here, but you're usually not gonna see anything below those points. So that's why it worked for his thing, and I think that's pretty smart. It's not what I wanted to do for this, and I considered maybe I do cut another one in here, but I think that gets more complicated, and this is already kind of complicated and probably going to fail anyway. So or have not fail, but have some issues anyway that I need to work out. So I keeping it just these limbs for now. But I've also thought about because if I want to be able to use it for like dismemberment and things like that as well too, you can make ideally it's like you can make cuts anywhere along this way. So if I cut boom, 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 technically I could make like another little piece of this right here, this forearm. I can make a piece that attached to this arm right here, make this forearm like a dismembered piece, another, or just a cap for that piece, and it would switch out with this arm. So if in the event of a dismemberment or something like that in Unreal, and I'm sure there's better ways to do this, this is just my idea for creating this. In the event of dismemberment, you basically turn these two off. These two turn off, like dismemberment specifically in this spot. These two turn off. This piece gets replaced with a forearm dismembered piece, which is going to be basically either it extends, you know, up to like right here, or it, you know, it just comes right here and is more of a cap for the upper arm area. So it would just be somewhere after this is just a dismembered piece, and then you would be able to technically just switch that piece out and put this one here, and then you'd have a dismembered piece that you could do. So you can use that for, you know, enemies, you can use it for people, things like that. So I wanted it to work for cybernetics. I wanted it to work for dismemberment. That's kind of why I also considered like maybe we do a cut at the head for, you know, for like dismemberment with a decapitation or something like that, or even just switching out with their cyber head and keeping the neck, whatever. Different ideas. May still do that. Depends on how complicated things get, because every time you cut a seam, if it's technically not attached, you can attach it with the weights and you should work. But if you're cutting a seam somewhere, there's a chance that it's going to be ripping at the seam, and that causes issues and when you're animating and things like that. So since I haven't got into a lot of the animation piece yet, I'm already kind of sure that I don't want to push this too much further than he is, because there's likely going to be issues that come up with the complexity of it already that I don't want to add more before I get to the point where I'm going to actually see that. But I have, you know, I have got simple animations, just some Mixamo animations on him in Unreal. Use my own skeleton with ARP in Blender to retarget or to and used my own custom one because I wanted to have options of changing things around, and ARP has a pretty good rig in Blender. So if I'm going to animate in Blender, I liked the idea of having that more, and it was more fit to my mesh, and getting the metahuman skeleton to work was a little complicated. So I opted not to use the metahuman skeleton initially. I may change that. I've been seeing the way that the new system works and I kind of like it. So I may end up changing that to be something that maybe uses. The idea was always to use my own body rig, which I can add on to, and then to use the metahuman facial rig because it has some really good fidelity there. I may end up just doing full metahuman rig depending on how the new system works. I'll have to see if it messes up my stuff. I think there's possibly a workflow I can do that's metahuman rig, completely custom topologies always, and then ARP for a control rig inside Blender for animation that gets linked to the metahuman rig. I was seeing a workflow on it the other day, and I think I may try that, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But yeah, other than this guy's, he's named him Adam off of, you know, channel name, the username that I've always used. So he's my instead of being like, it's a play on like, instead of being like Adam and Eve, it's just Adam ATOM, to make it a little more sci-fi and more what I like. But yeah, I don't know. So that's why I chose it. I like that's my name. or my default male, the base one, the progenitor of all the base meshes. So that's him right now. I tried to stylize something, or stylize it to the way that I like it for the just art style that I kind of like for my characters, and the idea of having something that is mostly based in realistic proportions a little bit, but just a little more exaggerated. A lot of inspiration, and it's not even as I still wanted him to be pretty default, so I didn't even push it that hard, just enough to something that I like, something that feels like a default. Maybe he's a little more heroic than I'd like, a little bit more in shape. I thought about making him a little bit frumpier, but I don't know. I think it ended up coming to about here is what I ended up liking the most when I went through this first time, and I still may change it. I can technically change anything. I just have to be aware that the seams, if I change the seams, I do break some of the stuff because of the way that I have it set up. So I do need a better workflow when I'm working on different characters to make sure that I am not changing the seams, or at least I am at the end. I am still, merging them back to the correct, correct position so we can reuse them. Yeah. So right now, it's not locked in that it's roughly locked in the idea, but I need a better safeguard, because technically if I move these seams at all, I can do anything in here, mess in here, we'll do all this, can give him boobs or something like that, and it's still okay. Give him a stomach, but as soon as I adjust the shoulders, I'm messing up both the skeleton and the messing up both the skeleton and the seams, so things aren't going to match up anymore. So I do need to make sure I preserve that overall. So that's something I need to work on to fix it. But I guess initially it's just test, proof of concept. Can this work? And got this in Unreal and tested in the initial one, and it did work. I was able to cut into parts. Everything in Unreal is a separate part, and it worked correctly. So I like the direction. There's a few things I noticed with the way that the cuts were around the arm, which is probably protect some topology in like the original base mesh, but for my purposes I needed a more clean cut around the arm because I did want to have a little bit more that I was working with here. So I ended up cutting it, or making it a little straighter here and cutting it right there. Shoulder, it's a complicated area. I still may have to change this eventually, so maybe the cut needs to be farther down right here, but I like the idea of redoing the arm, kind of based on like Cyberpunk, how they did it. And I did look at a lot of Cyberpunk in the modding tools. I looked at a lot of the Cyberpunk models, and saw how they split things up, and in the actual game design of it. And I talked to some Cyberpunk like CD Projekt Red devs to kind of understand how they did some of the stuff in the game as well. And they're super friendly. Most artists are friendly if you just reach out to them. So I talked to them a little bit to try to get the idea of how they're doing it. Some of the things I went to look at the game files, looked at how they do Johnny's arm and things like that, how to do a lot of the cybernetics. And they do have a seam somewhere between it's usually somewhere between the neck and the shoulder. Technically you would be building, you would have hero meshes and NPC meshes, and there'd be different to preserve fidelity. This one is supposed to be a generic, just kind of middle of the line, that we can maybe simplify for NPCs if we want to, or update for specific hero meshes and characters and things like that. But since this is still an art forward, not a game forward project, I wanted to keep it mostly art, higher fidelity and quality over really game optimized. And we still may do that and work on it, but first and foremost I want it to be an artist kind of pipeline that we're working with. So that's what this was. initially started this. Anyway, it's a long spiel just for kind of nothing really, nothing really important. Just kind of giving a overview while we're while we're starting up here. And since this is more of a chill day, it's just kind of it's just kind of something that oop, that was my other object. But yeah, it's just kind of something that you can go through and work on to have something different than just 2D stuff all the time, and get me used to kind of talking about my workflow and process for more complicated things like 3D, because this is what I think I enjoyed more. See what you doing? My dog is also right here, baby girl. He's just off camera. But yeah, so long spiel for what is essentially I wanted to work on this project that I've been taking a little bit of a break on because I've got sidetracked with a bunch of different things, both art and not art, and just even just streaming and things like that. I started working on this before I was streaming, but what I want to do next, and the next step in my Kanban. Athena, what are you doing? Hey, what are you spilling for? I'm sorry, you need your bed. My dog is right here. She's being very needy. But yeah, so what I wanted to do for this is to proof of concept for my character that I've been working on. I was building an initial Cyberarm, and that was just end up being a rabbit hole of, it was supposed to be just a very simple skeleton that I could test in Unreal and switch it out to have one arm that's good and one arm that's cybernetic and whatever. That's what started this. That's what the initial initial concept or initial idea was just how do I do that, and then it just expanded into well, let me research how to do hard surface in Zbrush, how to do some other stuff, or how to how do I build something. And then I was like, since it is for my setting that world building I've been working on, I was like, well, what am I actually planning for this piece here? Like, how do I want it to be built? Different things like that. So it's it has definitely expanded and changed directions multiple times through this process, but I kind of have it at a point now that I feel like I've done a lot of research on stuff, because there's a lot of it was just design. How do I whatever, I've taken it to 2D, I've kind of gone back and forth, I've had to learn a lot of mechanical kind of engineering things and concepts and stuff to understand the movement and how things work, different actuators, different I guess, I don't know, muscle systems, synthetic muscle systems in both fantasy and real life to build things off of. I started building up a whole tech reference board, so I can actually reference some real things. I started trying to figure out the aesthetic I wanted of it, my setting, and then started figuring out some technology in my setting, especially when I got to like this power source up here. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to use as reference and stuff like that. So that's where it ended up here. And then it's just figuring out hard surface in ZBrush, like how do I even do that? Because it's not something I like to be a lot more organic. Hard surface in both 2D and 3D is something that I'm not as comfortable with, and something that I've always wanted to get better at. So that's what this has been more of that, but essentially I'll go through this initial design that I kind of have here. Let's see if I can, and this is very rough, this is all Dynamesh, this is not something that we would is game ready at in any sense. Like, it's all triangles from the sculptress. Also, it's all nothing is Z-remesh at all. Here it's super loose. I have a few pieces in there that I was trying to work out, like the inner workings and things like that. And then it was also figuring out in like a game kind of piece. Like, I know I said I want more fidelity in quality than I want more quality than actual what do you call it? Oh yeah, I wanted more quality than actual you know, optimization. There we go. So yeah, but I do think in a game, I do think part of this, you know, challenge and thing that I've been working on needs to also be able to needs to also be, you know, following at least somewhat of the yeah, needs to be following at least somewhat of the game standards. So it's not, you know, just it's not just you know, just completely unoptimized and things like that. So yeah, so I would instead wanted to so I did, you know, take a detour in Cyberpunk and figure out how they did it. Basically the way they topologize meshes is they have most of it ends up becoming, even though you may have layers when you build it, most of it gets retopologized into one just solid water type mesh for the most part. So even though, you know, like something like these tubes right here would be maybe their own separate piece, because you can kind of you know, add in you know, some geometry that's separate, but for the most part, most of this mesh would just basically end up being one, you know, all of this right here, even though you know, there is supposed to be mechanisms under it and things like that, all of this becomes like one mesh just on top, just the profile retopologized down for a game ready sort of topology. You know, maybe tubes and stuff like that will come off and be their own mesh a little bit, but everything else still is one solid mesh. In this case, I may still do something like a what do you call it, something like a system that breaks, you know, the Cyberarm pieces into their own separate meshes, and there's still going to be a high poly and low poly and stuff like that, so we have all of that also we have to keep accounting for. But I do like the idea that maybe that we have upper arm and lower arm and hands still separate, maybe detachable and switch, and you can switch it out, because if you just, like, the idea is like if you're in a game, you would probably like to or it would be cool if you could switch out, because I think that was one of my big complaints about like Cyberpunk, was that or one of the ones that complaints I see a lot in Cyberpunk is that, you know, you have you install all this cool cyberware in stat wise, but you actually only visually get, you know, a few pieces of cyberware that, you know, affect your hands and things like that. I think it would be cool if you actually were able to get, you know, different pieces and actually, you know, see those pieces and switch out. And it's a lot more complicated and definitely, you know, not ideal for, you know, game design when you're trying to optimize. And, you know, the more things you add, the more complexity, the more scope creep, all that. But I like the idea of being able to do that. And so at least for this, I wanted to design around a system that could do that. And if I do different types of characters, it'd be nice to switch things out. Especially because, yeah, like even if I'm not designing for a game, I can, you know, I can still make a hero character that uses the same system, but you know, at least is optimized to fit into the same system. But I can, you know, tailor everything to that specific character if I want to, because I have a specific idea in mind for a hero character. Like, you know, like a Johnny Silverhand has a custom topology because he is Johnny Silverhand. He's not every character, so you're going to spend time making everything fit to him instead of making him fit to everything. V uses, you know, a system that's a little bit more generic, because, you know, you have to be able to customize your character and wear all these different outfits. Not every outfit's tailored specifically for V. I mean, it is, but kind of not. Also with NPCs, technically in Cyberpunk, a lot of cool NPCs, and they have cooler clothing, because a lot of times the clothing is custom made for that mesh and custom fit to that mesh, and the, you know, cybernetics custom fit to that mesh, because that mesh is just kind of one mesh, is not going to change, because, you know, NPCs aren't wearing different things, unlike, you know, something like Fallout or Skyrim and Bethesda games have a base mesh that everything can fit on. That there's just maybe a male and female you know, variant, and, well, technically, and then maybe like a you know, Khajiit, Argonian variant, if that, because there's a little bit of different bodies. Baldur's Gate is a good one where they have a pretty good customization on their characters, and at the same time have a pretty good variant system that customizes the different. Most NPCs can wear pretty much everything, and the outfits are fit to them, and there's different body types. So you see this in other games as well. Like Cyberpunk has a big body type and, you know, regular body type. It has, you know, different animations and different, you know, structure and how they interact with things. But it's, you know, it's not for the characters, still for NPCs. Baldur's Gate has a big body type that you can play as, and it's like a variant on, you know, the default. And you can see like in the character creation menu, the orcs and like the humans have like the small humans and elves, and all the regular ones, you know, have the regular default one, which is the small person, small, you know, body type or whatever. And then they have the muscular body type. That's the big one that has, you know, little bit different animations, things like that. Things like orcs actually only have the big body type that you can use, but it still is technically the same body variant in animation wise, and like probably in like custom clothing structure and, you know, things like that, as as all the other big body types are. So you can see that variant in there. And that's something I kind of might do for this. So this will be the default, and then maybe we have one that's a bigger one that uses, you know, bigger animations and things like that. And it's more complexity, but it's only 2 levels of complexity. So you have, you know, default, and you make all the stuff fit to the default. Then you have a big one, and his shoulders are a little more broad. He's got a different, you know, he's got a different skeleton a little bit, or edited skeleton. Maybe not even that. But then you might just size him up a little bit, but then you have you know, make sure the seams fit, because the shoulders need to be a little broader, at least on, like if you have a big guy, you can maybe keep the joints in the same area, but the you know, shoulders get a little broader, a little beefier, on this, you know, a little beefier. So in order to make, you know, now this arm doesn't fit here anymore, so you need to make a new variant of this arm that is, you know, tailored to that big body type or whatever. So it would be one difference, not a huge difference, but you know, it's one, you know, thing that's different that you're gonna have to adjust for on every type for that body. But you can use that for all the races. Like if you make an orc, it's using the big body type, so it just needs, if you adjusted it for your big human, or you adjust it for your big orc, you can use it on the big human, and vice versa. So that's just kind of something that I was playing around with. Anyway, so let's get to this a little bit more. I imagine the stream's not going to be too popping, because I need to work on some engagement outside of Twitch. Twitch is not the best not the best place to get engagement, or to pick up, you know, outreach and stuff like that. Usually it's a place that comes to based on the other things that bring in, the other outreach you do that brings them in. So, and that's something I need to work on a little bit more for long form content and stuff like that. But you know, slowly. It's only session 6, I think, of this this initial project. Yeah. So, just kind of explain the arm a little bit more. Really roughed in. I need to get some better ways to clean up the mesh. And honestly, probably not going to get a lot of. It's been a while since I've been in Zbrush. Don't have my hard surface techniques studied up right now, so probably not going to get, you know, like a ton of work done on this today. This is just a little bit more keeping in the habit and seeing if I can get any interest with the Zbrush content over the 2D content as well. But to kind of go over the idea for this piece, it is a cybernetic that I was basing a few like guidelines I used for when I was building this. One is that I wanted to feel like retro tech. That was a big inspiration, so I can feel it to be like around 80s 90s tech. I like that idea for both the aesthetic of my setting and just also this being maybe like the default, like, you know, maybe even the retro arm in the setting or whatever, because, you know, it's the original base mesh guy. So I was like, maybe he gets like a, you know, more original kind of like mystic arm or retro arm or something like that. And I wanted it to be simple, and obviously it got way more complicated. I also like the idea of using a lot of Japanese bikes, and not even just Japanese bikes, just bikes in general, like retro bikes, for some of the inspiration for this piece. And I've concepting in Zbrush. I've been basically concepting in Zbrush and in Photoshop. So I've been taking things in Photoshop, figuring it out, improving on my hard surface skills, because they, as part of this project, they have got a lot better, but they were not the best before this. But figuring out, you know, how to make the shapes and things like that, and figuring out the underlying structure, easier to do in Photoshop than, you know, in ZBrush, or than in sculpting in ZBrush. It takes a little longer. But yeah, so I wanted to have some retro bike references or inspiration in this. So for pieces like, let me actually, that's a good thing we can do. We can do that because that's a low effort thing right now. So let's go ahead and just define. I've done this before, but I think I basically undid it at some point. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that color right here, and then MRGB. We're in the paint thing. You can kind of see if I hover over it. We are in the paint. Making sure I do my stuff. Make sure all my stuff's working. Mapping. Everything's good. Everything seems cool. Everything seems pretty stable, which is kind of crazy. Cool. 2600. Okay, cool. Yeah. Like I said, okay, yeah. So, yeah, the idea was to use some retro. Oh wait, never mind. Yeah, we're gonna do paint. So BPAI is what I have it as. We will do MRGB, which is it's gonna take both the material and the color. And technically I could probably do this in a different material, but I like the base material. I think it's solid material. And then we're gonna do where is it? BP. What am I looking for? Oh man, it's been that long since ZBrush. Okay, so BPA, and then MRGB, and then we want to fill the object. Behind there. Color, there we go. Color, fill object. Oh, I cannot see my camera. Fill object, there we go. Crazy. My camera's blocking that side of the screen completely. Embarrassing. Okay, cool. So fill the object. We have so now this object contains both the color and the material. So if we change materials to like something extreme like this chrome or anything like that, it will not change, which is what we want. Now, since we did the material, if I change material, I don't want to accidentally overwrite the material. I can do it I'm okay doing it intentionally, but I don't want to overwrite it right now. So we're gonna keep it like this. We have this, you know, base gray color as the material. I could change it and make it a little bit, you know, shinier, things like that. But for now, don't want to. I'm gonna go ahead and pick a color that's a little bit more brown, kind of leathery color. And I'm gonna start marking out the areas that I want it to be like a biker or like a vintage bike leather seat was the inspiration for these pieces. And so any of the soft areas, the areas that are going to be covering like internal mechanics and things like that, things that you know, in lore might need a little bit more protection, or things, you know, in real life that I just don't want to also completely have to model and figure out and really define. And I've, you know, done it for a lot of things, but you know, it's not realistic to fully, you know, build everything, because we can't build, you know, an arm, a cybernetic arm, really in real life. I mean, you can a little bit, you know, for the most part. You can't really, I guess. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and just, you know, mark out the leather piece or leather area here that I kind of want. So this is going to be covering, you know, anywhere it's going to deform on the skin. So if you have your muscle, your bicep is going to be deforming when you know, when you come, when you, yeah, I guess when your arm moves forward. So your bicep deforms, and so I figured this is a pretty big deforming area. I like the idea of it being, you know, a leather, you know, like it's leather, almost leather like skin material, like an old vintage bike, like a vintage bike seat on that spot. So this will deform a little bit when the bicep moves, things like that. I think I have technically have like a piston in here, is what the idea was, to be able to make this and to try to figure out how to, in skeleton wise, make that convert the motions over. But yeah, that was initially kind of that idea. I'm thinking I kind of wanted a little lighter and a little more orange. Yeah, that's fine, honestly. Oh, you know, a little tiny more red. I think I'm seeing in my head a little bit more red. Very subtle, but yeah, I like that more. So yeah, so that'll be, you know, an area that deforms there. I figure I based this top piece on one of the bikes that's like a real, I think it's the Moto Compo bike. I liked how there's a few bikes I think I based it on, but I like the idea of this being like a hard plastic piece, like the body of a motorcycle, just kind of over the top of the, you know, the internals. And then this piece underneath is also kind of deforming area. I figured this is where a lot of the tubing goes, because that's also one of the things I decided on, was that we're going to have a sort of hydraulic system for the muscle or the actuation pieces. Let me go ahead and turn, I know that I said that I wanted the piston, but let's go ahead and turn that off, because we're not committed to that right now. So yeah, so this down here is also going to basically be just a leather cover under the bottom, and I have it attached with these, roughly attached with, you know, these fasteners of some sort, these metal fasteners. You know, this is what is attached down here, and I like the idea of, you know, if there's need maintenance or whatever, because I figured this is somewhere where you're gonna have, if you have to do maintenance or diagnostics of any sort, and you are, you know, going to, you know, be somewhere, gonna be somewhere underneath here. It's also similar to, like, you know, you have greaves and gauntlets and stuff like that. This is where like the straps are, and, you know, the armor's on top, the straps are on the bottom, or like the straps and like that piece is on bottom. So it makes sense that this is the softer piece here, because also, like, if you're doing something, you're gonna hit the top or whatever, and the underside of your arm just is softer. So it made sense when I was planning this out. So yeah, so I have this underarm piece here that's like a leather piece. I can also, we don't need the body right now. We can go turn this off and just focus on this. So, and then I like the idea of this being like a you know, this striped, I don't know, not banded leather. I don't know what you'd call this, but like, you know, this ribbed leather feels very retro and like very vintage. I feel like a lot of vintage leather has stuff like that. Some of the seats, things like that. So, you know, be something more like that. And, you know, I might have refrained from doing that before, because it kind of damages, it destroys the underlying structure a little bit, but it's fine. We're just gonna go ahead and commit to it right now, because I don't see a reason not to at this moment, because I like the idea of this being what it's gonna look like. Almost looks a little bit like a Dragon Ball Z like armor, with that those striped pieces on their pauldrons and stuff like that. Roughly like that. I don't like that as and I use my for ZBrush sculpting. I actually use my old tablet, not the one that I use for drawing. And I'm thinking, okay, hold on, real quick, while we're here, I kind of saw a design in here somewhere. It was different. Okay, I saw a design in here, but I am like in my head for a second, but I don't know what I saw. That like looked kind of cool, but maybe we can make it a little bit more interesting, but make it a little more organic looking or something like that. I think there might be something in there, like maybe if you make it like layered like this, and like have something like that is kind of cool. That's kind of cool. I don't hate that. Oh, there's my dogs barking. I don't hate that. I think that is very different than the underarm, so maybe we don't want that. But maybe it doesn't feel like the retro the way that I wanted the retro to be. So maybe it's not what we go with overall, but I'm gonna leave it just for now. This is concepting, so I still may change to a, you know, just a standard, you know, one later. Yeah, that might looks kind of cool, but I may change to like a, you know, standard one later. But concepting, at least for now, because by the time next time I work on this, I might forget that I even had that idea. That's even kind of cool. So we'll do something like that for now. I'll leave it there so I can work on it later and still have it there and be like, decide if I want to. Because at the end of the day, this is disgusting. So disgusting topology, that's just messy testing topology. That's kind of cool. I actually kind of like that. Feels like leather almost more than this does. So maybe we take some of that design, bring it in here. There's Peachy, she's barking. But yeah, so but yeah, at least I have this. So now I've seen this, I can see it, I can decide if I want to keep that or not later. But at least we have that idea there. Let's go ahead and save Adam Beta. Because he's the beta version already. Arm concept. Cool. Okay, so yeah, so you know, that's maybe some leather piece right there. No idea. Shut the dog. Dang, bro, what are you doing up here? But yeah, so this is, bro, she's sick though, bro. He's $1,000 sick. But yeah, so keep that there for an idea later. And then so leather. This is gonna be some sort of leather that I'm gonna do BPA. This is gonna be like a synth plastic leather. So something like about that. I want it to be more like hard pads than actual deforming leather. Bro, I think you gotta start the the train. Damn, Peach, that's crazy. Okay, cool. So hard pads, plastic. I'm gonna need to pull a Hassan with Peach. Oh. Okay, so that might actually need to be a darker color. Realizing, yeah. Cool. So if I do this. Looking like Power Glove, Nintendo Power Glove color material here. Nice. Too dark. Go up in value a little bit. Cool. Electric chair. Dang, electric chair is crazy. Is this Texas or something like that? It's crazy. I don't even know. Do they even use? They don't even use electric chairs anymore, right? It's like a. You just come in here after barking. No, yeah, it's like electric chairs that were eventually considered like inhumane, right? We need to go back to firing squads. That's the true way to do it and handle it. Any sort of you know, any sort of crimes, you know, like back in the Western days. Actually, I think that was revolutionary, not revolutionary. That was Civil War times where they did firing squads. I learned that from what was it, 1,000 Ways to Die or something like that, when they're using firing squads, because there's like one dude who, back when I was, back when I was in middle school watching that, back when I was in middle school watching 1,000 Ways to Die, I think that was like one of the it was like one of the ones or that they showed or whatever, that there was like Civil War firing squads back in the day, but that someone died just because they got too scared and they didn't actually have hit him. That's like all my knowledge on the use of firing squads in anything. Was on a show that I think was lying about most of their actual all scenarios that they showed. Okay, cool. So if we use this, we're gonna do gold on the fingertips, so I can remember to do that. Metal material, that's way too gold. No. Nope. Nope. More red. I do not like Zbrush's color picker. I'm pretty sure there's a better way to do it, but really don't paint in Zbrush that often. That's good enough for now. I know what that is. Just for cybernetics, the idea was to have some sort of, whenever I actually get around to building the actual hand internals, because that's gonna suck to do. The idea was to basically, fingertips are going to be connected to the bone. That's going to be like sensory organs or something like that, like sensory, I don't know, sensory apparatus somehow connected to the bone and flare out a little bit. It might designs on Photoshop. That's how I've worked this one out. But the fingers are basically gonna have to be built. Well, the good thing is I only have to build one finger when I do the when I do the design for this actual piece. Whenever I clean it up and do the high poly for this, should only have to do one finger and then be able to duplicate it multiple times. But essentially have to go through. Finger has both a hard case of some sort on top. It has the joints that they're going to deform at. It has the underlying soft padded layer that I'm trying to put in here, BPA, and then bone or whatever sort of structure system I'm using underneath, which is probably, I think I have it worked out. It's going to be something like the frame of another vintage motorcycle, because that's what a lot of this was based off of. And so we have that, and then this piece, I'm gonna go ahead and make this as like a harder, like 90s plastic is the idea for how we want to design this, at least in material. So that kind of tannish, old computer monitor plastic, computer case plastic. Probably a little tanner than that actually is, but something like this. So if I just define all this out, so we mark different materials that we're going to be using, and that's going to come over to the top of the hand as well. I think that I am also going to end up using another sort of leather on this finger piece right here, just because this piece is going to deform a lot as well. So basically any place that is going to really deform like this, not as segmented and hard surface as these pieces are going to be for this hard plastic. So the idea was to use something like this, but the wrist is going to be the most complicated part of this project, just in general, because the wrist is a complicated part of people. And in real robotics, which I looked up a ton of for this, they basically have, there's a bunch of different ways to get the degrees of freedom for your wrist. So I forgot what I ended up on, but I think it's something like, it's ended up being something like a joint. I have to pull up my other reference, actual tech ref that I have over here, but I ended up think it doesn't need to be completely accurate because it's not a real, obviously not a real piece, but it ended up being like a U-joint, something like a U-joint, because that's easiest to animate for this. Could use a ball joint as well, sci-fi ball joint, and then spice it up for this piece, but it ended up being just a U-joint was ended up being, I think, what I was using for both, to have both a sideways freedom of movement, and then hinged freedom of movement. There's just like two hinges basically. I played around with a bunch of ideas for this, but ended up being just simpler to make something like that. And then basically you're not even really going to see that because it's going to be covered up with a bunch of wires and stuff that are routed through there, and then in actual game it should basically be all this piece is going to be covered up in one singular mesh, kind of like what they did in Cyberarm for pieces like this. Cool, let me pull up my reference so I can actually make sure. Ooh, I need to update that reference. That is not accurate anymore. Cool, but yeah, so what else did I have? So this hand also, I think I have another one that I built somewhere else that I need to pull up to try to figure it out, because I think I worked out the internals of the hand for this piece. Essentially it's gonna have, since I decided to use sort of hydraulics as the roughly real world equivalent of hydraulics, there's going to be tendons, finger tendons that come through here, connect to these points, and then some will be visible on top here. I don't think this is the hand that I ended up the latest design. I have to find that in my notes. But yeah, the hand is super complicated. One of the things I spent the most time on, and one of the things that has prevented this project from moving forward as fast as it should too, as I try to figure out and learn a bunch of weird robotic stuff. But the idea is to have cases over this, just kind of define those roughly in. Joints on fingers are going to be mostly hinge joints, which is, makes sense. This is going to also be plastic at top, so something like that. And I roughly have joints in there right now, but that's not the joint that I know it's not the joint that I landed on for this, because I do know that there's some specific things you take into account with joints, and some games have some pretty good design choices on it. Cyberpunk used just kind of some regular ones like this. I saw some stuff recently on some joints that have a pretty cool edge in the middle, so it kind of covers up the edge whenever it's at rest, but then when it bends, the edge gets more exposed, which I think is pretty cool. But this piece is definitely gonna take like a whole session just devoted to figuring out what I'm gonna do with the hand and how I want to take it apart, and cut into different subtool pieces, because right now it's all just kind of merged together. This piece, so it gets really messy and hard to read. It's also how much I want to actually try to figure out for real, and how much I just want to kind of wing by just kind of covering it up with some materials and things like that. But also taking into account animation wise, because if we use the same base mesh as this guy, as my base mesh, same model and everything. Let me go and change the pant color because that's going to bother me. But if I want to use the same base mesh, am I on the pants? Yeah, let's put on, yeah, something like that. It's fine. Color, fill object. Yeah, a better way to do that. Cool. Okay. That should stay the same now, for the most part. Okay. Yeah. So if I want to use the same base mesh for this guy, or the same skeleton for this guy that I use, for his Cyberarm and the regular animation, I need to make sure that these match up the same way. So joints have to be in the same relative spot. So if I have the joint here in the wrist, technically it needs to match up. It needs to match up in the same spot on the character, and these mostly do. There can be a little variation, but it needs to mostly be in the same spot, because based on my based on where my seams are, it's going to be roughly below the seam right there is, I think, where the joint is. So I need the Cyberarm mesh to terminate or have the joint hinged right here in the same place as well, so it animates the same. That is good for animation as long as we cover it up and we don't have it super defined and shown. But if we have like a really robotic and really mech joint that's really different than a regular wrist, or has really defined actuation pieces, or freedom movement pieces, or degrees of freedom pieces, so joints and hinges and things like that. Or if we have pistons or whatever is moving it here, if we were animating just this piece, we could really get in there and animate all those pieces, give everything bones it needs, make everything work with like IKs and things like that really well. But with this, since we wanted to be able to work on the same skeleton and be able to be used in the same system, same workflow and pipeline and everything, it needs to have the exact same hinge points, and it's only going to be one bone, so we only have one bone to play with. We can switch, we can add new bones to this. So if we take this one bone, we put some new bones around it, and then have, you know, whenever it's a cybernetic arm in the Unreal Engine, we can go through, build these, you know, pistons or whatever, and then split it into bones that, you know, work with that. We can take mathematically in some there's some equations you can do as part of the animation skeleton or rig or whatever. I've done it for some pieces, but basically we would split that one bone that can go, you know, left and right, up and down, move all those, you know, all that freedom of movement, or degrees of freedom, DOF. All those degrees of freedom, we can split it, you know, math wise, into different bones that we add around to help it. And so those can be attached to the mechanical pieces and can animate a little bit. That gets more expensive though, and that also gets more complicated to manage, especially if it's only for one specific you know, mesh. So if we have one arm that uses those really specific ways to, or hinge joints, and or, you know, just whatever system it's using, then we are locked in to, we created new bones, new information and things like that, but only for one specific thing that's not going to be used again. So can be done, but if we do something like that, we need to make it to be something that's going to be used multiple times. So I do kind of want to work with this piston that I kind of was playing around with here for this bicep piece. So I do want to at least add a bone there for this piston piece, but this is something that if I add this bone here, then I need to be able to make other pieces that are also going to, like other arms and things like that, are also going to reuse that same bone for that same movement to justify the inclusion of, you know, that helper bone for cybernetics specifically on the skeleton. Because once it's in there, it's going to be kind of in there forever, and it'll be just more complexity that we have to deal with and, you know, maintain or document and things like that. So that's one of the pieces working on for that. For this back piece, I wanted this to be hard shell also similar, oops, not the right subtool. Yeah, so copying this similar plastic piece, and definitely a little too tan for what I'm envisioning for the material, but I think it's okay because it makes sense. At least it helps break up the piece. And then this is also going to be, I think I wanted this also to be the same plastic. Yeah, this is all part of that. This is kind of the outer shell, kind of like what you'd see on the motorcycles that I was using for reference. Outer shell here, add that layer, and a big part of why I split the seam where it was is that I wanted to be able to pull like that thin skin, synthetic skin, out a little bit more from the base mesh model. So this piece right here should, ideally, it's going to use some of the same topology as this base mesh topology. I'm just going to kind of pull it over into the cybernetic arm here. So it's going to pull over, use the same skin texture ideally also. So if whatever we texture this piece here, and, you know, that was on the original arm, this should still be using that same UV information and just kind of overlap this way. This is something that I saw in I think in Cyberpunk, on Johnny Silverhand's arm, that they used a similar piece that makes it feel more integrated, even though it's a separate piece. Makes the arm feel more integrated, not just like a harsh cutoff right along the seam. It feels like it actually comes over into the seam. The only piece that would need to be added, we'll be able to borrow the topology from the top right here. The piece that we need to add though is going to be this, this lip right here, because the mesh, when it's turned off, is just going to have this super, infinitely thin edge. And then so we just need to make sure we actually add thickness to this skin piece. And then maybe even like one more layer. I can go ahead and add that. Have like one more layer that's like going to represent the metal shell or whatever that's directly underneath the skin that it's attached to. So this would be another layer that we go on top of right here. We'll just kind of define that lip right there. Just to add that depth. Doesn't add too much, but it's just a little bit of that depth. Helps feel like it's a multi-layered piece instead of just being something that's immediately attached. Because one of the things I could have done too for this was try to hide the seam a lot more than I have, and I probably will need to overlap a little bit with like either some like we can do something simple like let's see, let's go ahead and grab, okay, let's do our new subtool, insert sacrificial star, then sacrifice that star to initialize a cube. Dope. Yeah, that's how I remember that process. This is using the sacrificial star method. Cool, but yeah, so essentially we're gonna take this box right here. This is a really low poly Z modeler I guess intended use a cube, so that's why it's super low poly, so you can actually use ZModeler on it, and it works pretty well for that. I do hate ZModeler sometimes, but it is pretty powerful. I do need to spend some more time practicing it. But yeah, so essentially we take this little cube here. Let's do a little bit of Z modeling on it. Nope, that's not the right subtool, or zero mesh or Z model. Oh no, it is. Cool. So we can take this piece right here. Then we're going to select. We're going to select target polygroup. No polygons. Polygroup all, I guess. Yeah, cool. And then we're going to inset this. So polygroup all is selected. Inset. Polygroup all. Actually, don't want to inset. Want to do one of these things that I do not recall the right way to do. All right, we're doing it this way. This is a simpler way to do this. There we go. I just want to squish that down a little bit, so it feels more like a little hinge, or undo that mask, just a little latch or something. Down. There you go, cool. Yeah, okay, cool. And then I'll go ahead and go take this BZM. I'll take this, bevel this edge, so bevel, edge loop partial, that should do. Nope, edge loop complete. Sure. That does something, and then do this poly loop in let's do QMesh. Yeah, let's do this. No, it's alt. No, there's a way to select. Space? No. This? No. BZM. do this. It's been a minute. Z. That's not it. That is something though. There, it's Alt. That's what I did. Okay. All right, cool. So Alt to grab these specific ones. I guess we'll inset just to preserve that a little bit. Nope, that didn't do that. What I wanted it to do. QMesh. Polygroup. All. Yeah, something like that. All right, that's fine. Cool. This doesn't really matter too much for this piece, but we can. So we have a little. We can see this little piece here. We can put this as like just some sort of piece that overlaps that seam a little bit too, because we do need to hide that a little bit more. Probably wouldn't be that big either. We can do something a little smaller like that, and then maybe just like along this seam right here, that's kind of bridging the gap, or bridging that gap between the actual skin and then the cybernetic that we have here. And we can make these more complicated later on, or less complicated depending on the mesh. I want to grab just this one. This. Cool. All right, so yeah, something like that, just to have some sort of bridge on that gap. And probably won't be that in the final one, but something that there just to help sell that it's not completely the same. I don't know. We'll see. See this day, but yeah. So that's what we'll do for. So that's kind of why I wanted to keep this piece of skin in there, to have that depth, so we actually feel like we do have some overlap in the different limb pieces. And then over here, this is all based on like an engine motor. It's probably based on this. You have the cooling there. We have some pipes there. Some like cast aluminum is what we use for that. This is the elbow piece. This is going to be where the actual arm starts. So this is where it actually hinges. Let me go ahead, and I do have some of the blueprint for this. So BPA. Actually have it as black in my notes, but I like the brown better right now. So I'll just go ahead and just do. This is going to be more of like make it actually kind of a green. Not that green. Cool. So yeah, so this is going to be more of the actual framework on this piece of tech that I built here. Section it out. The idea is to also create a sort of screen on this piece right here, a little readout screen or something like that. I think it would look pretty cool, but we'll see how that works, and that would be something we'd have to define a little bit more inside actual Unreal with shaders, and I don't know how expensive that would turn. So we will see what that looks like when we actually get it into Unreal a little bit more. This was the idea for this piece, was to be a sort of energy, I guess, generator piece of the arm. So we have little slots for what I've built, and these are going to need to be like separate pieces that we like kind of like work in here. These are like the batteries, essentially going to look like game cartridges, which would have a similar coloring to the rest of the plastic shell that we're using. So we can go ahead and bring that in. piece. Okay, I don't like the little clips. That needs to actually be like planned out a little bit better. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this would be just kind of like a rough kind of military-like metal. Is the idea for this piece here. This would also be following that same piece. Yep. Okay. Cool. Like that, and then I don't actually know what I built there. Have to look into that because I don't like how that looks like. It doesn't really have anything defined there. These are going to be where it actually hooks in. I think I have one here as well. Yeah. Might have a little bit of a disconnect there. And then underneath, this is also plastic. Let's go solo again. BPA through here. Something like that. I don't actually know if that feels like it should be the same piece. I'll go ahead and I do have a little bit of in the concept I did have a little bit of a line there. Something like that. And I don't think it's going to be like a separate panel here. I think it's just kind of a molded piece of the shell, but roughly in there for now. All this should be a plastic. I'm kind of thinking that this needs to be metal though. It's like there needs to be a separation right about here. Go ahead and separate those into separate pieces. And then ideally, like if I was going to take this, or I guess the next step for this would be rough in all the stuff. Once I'm happy with the shapes and happy with the parts, then we can actually start splitting up and polishing and making them actual pieces and not just like loose ideas. Because they really can't be used for any sort of actual game model or anything like that in this state. It actually defines some of it we can hand wave and put underneath all the different housing and things like that. Like we don't need to go in and define exactly everything inside this this upper arm and things like that. We still may if we want to. I mean, just when we're building the high poly and things like that, it may help, but we don't need to do that right now. Let me go ahead and actually change my material to a sort of metallic one, so we can start defining the metal in here. Steel, there you go. That doesn't feel like it's doing what I thought it would. No, don't like that. That doesn't feel like it's doing that. Need something textured metal. Oh, whoops. Not on the right thing. So steel, and then turn on material. There you go. This is going to look bad because of all the tessellation from using Sculptress and having all of the having the triangles from Sculptress. So all this is not going to make it look pretty when you have two different materials because they don't blend in at even edges. this is better for when we actually get to the like clean zero mesh topology. But to at least help define all this, so I kind of know what I'm looking at and not just looking at a blob. I think this should be enough. Yeah. I think I'm gonna go ahead and make this metal up here too. Let's see if I can make it a little brighter. Yeah, that feels okay. Let me see if I go dark, does it feel better? Kind of okay with the dark if I keep these latches that I feel like are gonna be more of like a shinier metal. If I keep that brighter, help some contrast with that. I think I'm okay with that. A lot of different colors though. I think technically maybe this piece right here would need to basically be the same metal to keep it from not having too many colors in this thing, too many different materials, even though I like the idea of being more military style metal. I think keep it unified and from getting too messy. What we're managing, keep darker metal is like a darker, rougher metal. It's going to have less roughness on it for the actual less roughness on it for the actual specularity as well. And then these brighter ones are going to be brighter, more chromy metal. That way they stand out a little bit more and have a better contrast up against the dark metal too, and they'll be a little shinier. And I think for this metal lip that I created underneath the arm, underneath the actual synthetic skin, I think this is going to be that shiny metal because I think it's got a good contrast. It's got a good contrast compared to the to the plastic piece underneath. And then okay, cool with that. This plug, I don't know about that. This is going to be that chromey color. I'm okay with that. I believe I would want this to be also a chromey color for this these heat fins here to be chromey. I want this to feel like cast aluminum to kind of take on at least the brighter metal for right now. We may want to make some of this dark metal, but right now, just to keep it separate, I'm going to keep it all like that. And then this dark metal is going to be this elbow piece right here. For the essentially what's going to be the start of the forearm, I'm going to also do this as a dark metal for now. I'm not sure if I wanted to stay that, but in my concepts it was a dark metal before too, so I'll keep that at dark metal. Piston kind of entry point right here, also we'll keep that as a part of that, at least as dark metal. And then we take that piston piece. Let's fix this up a little bit to get it a little more aligned. This is I was trying to be a little cleaner with it, but we've deviated from this original concept a few times already, so it doesn't look like it used to before. Because essentially, so this is almost starting the start of the forearm, I guess, actual forearm actual structure, the cleaner structure. A little bit is what I had started doing here and trying to figure out how it would move. how this needs to be translated if we're going to put it into an actual animation style. So yeah, so this, let me go ahead and paint these also. So PA color fill object, wherever it is, fill object, there you go. I'm pretty sure I have that button somewhere else. Yeah, do it like that. But yeah, so at least fill these objects. I do want, let's see, I want this actual piston bar here to be the brighter metal though, so it has contrast with the surrounding frame of with that darker metal. I think technically I also want this is where it turns, so hinges here, then twist on the forearm is this one right here. I believe, let me check my concept. Yeah, I believe I have this one right here as a lighter metal as well. And then, but technically this piece would be covered up by the by this leather piece here. Cool. Yeah, like that. So we would just see, yeah, so we would just see that top piece where the forearm is connected, and then it twists underneath that. It might need to be a little smaller on the on that forearm piece, but for now we can read it, and that's what we need. Okay, let's finish painting the steel. Make these to be the brighter metal. Where they're just kind of connecting somehow down here, basically latched. And the idea is that if there was maintenance need to be done on this piece, then if you're working on the arm or whatever, you would just use this access panel right here with the leather underneath. Cool. And then all of this on the hand, we can go ahead and just define metal points right here. I'll go ahead and say the joints are gonna be metal, so just so we can know where they are. Joints here, joint here, joint here, joint here. Let's do that. Not right now. I have the metal material right now, so we're not going to want to mess with those too much yet. And then I want around this leather piece, kind of like we did at the top, there'll be some sort of metal, bright metal, exit, entry point, whatever. And actually go ahead and just rough that in with our clay buildup. So clay buildup, just build a little shape in there. Cool. Joint. Joint, and then this would hide the, actually this would be farther up, this would be about right there. Yeah. And then, yeah, so really want to cover up this joint also because I don't want to deal with the complexity of this joint. It is basically, you need to have a movement that goes, let me pull it up. Yeah, so you need movement that's gonna go this way, from side to side like this with the thumb, and then you also need it to move this way. Technically there's more, but basically how it works. The thumb movement works, and I looked at a bunch of like real robotic prosthetic arms to see how they do it, and like mechanical hands and things like that. There's a few different ways. Thumbs get weird. There's a few tendons on the thumbs too that also gets weird, and how all those connect. But essentially, you can do it into two points of actuation, or yeah, we essentially can do it with two joints. There's one that would be right in here. Basically, you would have one right here that would go like around the thumb like this, and that would handle the movement for when you close your, basically when you bring your thumb into your palm, that would handle that movement. And then further up after that would be the one that actually does the up and down, this one that does, the one that does this. So there'd be another hinge joint or something like that in there, but gets a little complicated in design. Still doable, but something that I don't really want to deal with, because in animation, this is also where that matters more, because it would just be one bone joint that we would be using, which we could split it up again into different movements, but it's just a little more complicated that don't want to deal with on this one. Maybe on some others if we whenever we get to that. Yeah, so roughly the layout of the materials that we're going to use for this. Very cool. That's roughly what we want to do. There's a few pieces here, especially in this area here, that I do want to create separately. Part of the stuff I've been working on is figuring out the designs for these pieces. So for these little cartridges, I do have a specific design that I'm working on that I want to get in here. That I would do separate. It would be its own project to do separately, but once I have it I can reuse it in a bunch of different things. These I also inadvertently kind of figured out for when I was designing some of the stuff for the overlay UI for the stream. I was messing with some vectors. I did inadvertently kind of make a whole system for the this type of object in the system. It's kind of just it's the whatever this sci-fi basically the little sci-fi equivalent of just magic or whatever, the thing that makes stuff in the system work for this idea. The thing you can just hand wave, or you can just say, oh, you hand wave the logic of whatever you're building. That's what those little cartridges are for. But I ended up coming up with the design for them by working on another piece and figuring out how I wanted it to basically interact in its uses. I ended up finding a pretty cool design language for these, so these are going to end up being a little more defined, probably in their own project as well, and then used in other places. So so we can reuse it for other things as well, other projects as we go. What am I doing? Steel. But yeah, that's kind of the point of some of this. Of figuring out this workflow for all these different pieces and putting it in Unreal. I wanted to at least be able to build up all these assets in a way that I can use them effectively in other things going forward too. So I figured these out, a lot of these pieces out now. Then they're good to go and move in other projects. Just got to figure it out at least once. But in my current workflow, a lot of stuff just ends up in Blender and just kind of sits there and doesn't really get used too much again. So that's what I want to try to avoid. This is going to be essentially a custom wire or something like that. I would think I would imagine this would just have a whole bunch of wire. So it's basically just a, kind of like a wiring harness. A lot of different cables go in there, root in there, then connect to the forearm, which then routes all the tubes and wires and fluids or whatever to the rest of the system. It does feel like this would be a really important piece that, if it failed, would break the whole thing. But we're not going to worry about that. That's not a problem. Yeah, that's fine. We'll leave it exposed. That's fine. But yeah, so essentially this is going to be everything from the top would be rooted into the upper arm, then the upper arm roots it into the forearm, and the forearm roots splits things out wherever it needs to go. Ideally, we'd have more little bits and bobs on this forearm piece that maybe does other stuff. I don't know. Maybe there's like another latch here that opens up, and then once it pops up, and pops up here or whatever, you can, or actually technically the other way around, it would be this. Pop up, this piece would maybe be separate, and like that, and so then it would pop up or something, and it would hinge, like around. Have like a hinge or something here. I don't know, something like that. Whatever. This is split up, open or whatever. So we could design maybe different versions of this top using piece, but I just want it to be simple now so we can test it out in Unreal to see if the system works or whatever. But we can switch it out. And then since I do want to use this also to create a dismemberment system of this modular piece, I played around with the idea of having dismemberment also on the cybernetics. So maybe there's different versions of these arms, whether they're damaged and things like that. The other piece that I do want to work on, that's gonna be, I'm gonna save this right now because this is at least a little more defined out than it was before. The other piece that I think I'm gonna work on for this is going to be, and we can kind of roughly put in, let's just put in a little cylinder for right now. Are you off? But I think it would be beneficial, and I definitely need to I definitely do need to getting this in here. Do need to sketch this piece out to figure out what this would end up looking like. I do kind of like the idea of there being like I need local symmetry. That's not the right local symmetry. How do I do local symmetry the other way? Stroke. Transform. Nope. Nope. The best part about Zbrush is trying to figure out where anything besides the base stuff is. Local symmetry, local symmetry, local symmetry tool. It can't be a tool because that tool has everything. Transform. It's gotta be, there we go. Let's do it on Y. Nope, not Y. Transform on Z. There we go. God, I need to use that more. Yeah, local symmetry. Huge in when you're working on stuff that's not directly in the center, but dang, I need to actually use this more. And that's crazy. I need to add a filter to protect against the dogs barking. Okay, cool. So ideally I want to create these. Not ideally. Don't know why ideally is in the vocab today. That's not one of my usual ones. But yeah, so I want to create some sort of port piece for these cybernetics also, and I'm playing around with maybe like three versions of the port. Ooh, that's not gonna work. Does that preserve? It does not preserve entirely, no. Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, ideally I want to play around with three versions of a port that we can use for like the cybernetics. So maybe we have like one that's normal, like this will be the base one. Then we have one that is a one that's like maybe like really rough and bulky. That's gonna actually go over the arm more for connection and things like that. So something that's actually gonna be bulky and maybe like even like up here it's like reinforced or something. That bigger cybernetics get attached to, and then maybe one that's just like super thin and we don't need to make like we just have like a really subtle port for the connection point. We don't necessarily need that. We can do technically everything inside whichever cybernetic we're designing, but I like the idea of if we're going to be modular with it, then we can have an attachment point and maybe even have it turned off at some points, like a cybernetic turned off, but we still have something there covering that gap that's left by turning off the limb, the modular limb. So something like that. I mean, actually not something like that. Not something like this. Is just kind of roughing something in right now. Because yeah, this is definitely not going to be anything until we actually sit down and start working the design out in 2D first. So yeah, so port would have to have a little bit of a lip, which would make it actually kind of something like this. It would have to have something and have a little bit of a lip that connects to the real skin or whatever we have here. And then it would come inward a little bit like that. And then here we have, like some sort of like bone attachment, something like that. That doesn't need to be sticking out, can attach in, but something like that. Maybe other ports and things like that attach to the body. Let's do 256 for a resolution on this. Yeah, so we could have. Now let's actually do 512. Resolution. There we go. Ooh, that looks bad. I'll do that. BIN to blow this up to make it thicker so we can have some topology to play with. And now do 512. That should be enough. Keep it there. So yeah, so if we do something like this, we bring that in. It's going to be like the arm bone or attachment piece that it's going to connect to. So I imagine it'd be something like a little circle like that. I do want it to might come a little bit over the skin. I haven't decided yet if I want it to fully be in or to like slightly overlap. I think I'm okay with it overlapping on the bottom right here. So if we have something that kind of comes over like that and just kind of sits up against the lats right here, I think I'm cool with that. I just don't really want it to go over the top. We can avoid. I think it just feels. I mean, it's what most cybernetics, if you're gonna someone's design a cybernetic is gonna do, is gonna put some stuff over top and kind of hide that seam. I really want to try avoiding that if I can. You can have like a little lip, but I just don't want it to. I just don't want it to feel like the classic hiding the seam look. I would like it to be just a little bit inset, which would essentially we're gonna basically we would take this lip right here of these vertices and just kind of move them in, move them down and in. Yeah, it would have to be like that. It would be like, yeah, it would have to have like a little lip just to give it thickness of the skin, and then maybe like, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and try that. Need to see. Solo this. Don't get banned. Cool. Shift F. Control. No. Control. Let's turn this in from a regular masking tool into a lasso. Right here, let's go to lowest subdivision because you get too complicated on the higher subdivisions. So we take these vertices that are all along this line. We just want to grab this line. We don't want anything else. Okay, something like that. This is probably going to be easier to do in Blender as well, or like an actual modeling system and not in Zbrush. But we're in here, so we're going to do. How do I want to do this? Let's just do. This is not the right way to do this, but this will work. So take this. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and just. Select this. I'm gonna need this right here as well. Guess we'll just take that all there. All this. This as well, and I need that. Ooh, that corner may be an issue later, but that's weird. I don't actually know. That's weird. I don't know if I. Oh wait, no, right? No, that's fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I don't love that little star right there. I probably should have fixed that when I did this, but it's fine. We'll figure it out. Okay. Get rid of these guys. I don't need these guys. Get rid of all of you. I don't need you. What if you? See if that should work. Yeah. Okay. So now going to this is a duplicate. So yeah, it's a duplicate. So we should be good with this. Okay, so duplicate, and then I'm going to. This is just a test, so you don't need it to be pretty. but I'm gonna go take this and I'm going to yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and delete hidden, yep, and delete higher, yep. Now we just have this subtool is only this, there's no other rest of the mesh, but we still have the other mesh if we wanted to see if we could do it. Ew, that looks gross. Okay, cool. So we have this. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna use poly edge loop complete, and then we are going to we're going to extrude. Yeah, I think this. Nope. Need edge loop. Nope. Need edge loop. Edge loop. Ah. That's okay. Let me do. That's because of this piece here. Okay, let's delete this. We don't need it. Delete. Delete. And then I wanted to move stitch. Let's move. You just move this into there, and then this into. Okay, there, yeah. So now we have an edge loop complete here. Insert single edge loop. All right, edge loop there. Not that we really need to really care about that. And then we're going to extrude edge loop here. So now we have a little bit of edge loop that has a little bit of the thickness that's coming from that edge that we have there. So we have that thickness coming down a little bit more. And we are gonna actually want to take this. If I do this, yeah, there we go. There we go. So that adds a little bit of that thickness to the edge loop. Let me see if I can do that one more time. There we go. What if I do Control Shift? That's Alt's the only way. Okay, yeah. So we're adding thickness to the skin there. So this is the skin right here. This is the actual border. This is a new border for the skin. So we just want to just add a little bit of how thick we think the skin is. Maybe something a little bit more like this. Yeah, something like that. Super messy, not what we'd use on the real, like in the real modeling to make this. We do it a little bit cleaner in Blender or something like that. And then, but now that we have this piece as like the edge, we're gonna go ahead and bring it. Edge loop again. Bring it back. That's the thickness. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, so then skin here, then here would be the start of the metallic layer that's underneath that we did on the other piece. Something like maybe like that. Ooh. Oh, cool. I didn't know I did that. What is... Oh, weird. What is that? Oh, that's the other way. I guess change the direction. Okay, cool. I did not know I did that. Okay. So cool. So metal. So skin, metal layer, same deal. back a little bit. And so now we could technically delete. We need to delete this. I don't think we need this. Delete. Edge loop complete. I don't think we actually need that. And then if we take solo off, take that piece off. We don't need that. Bring back our base mesh. We can go ahead and take this whole edge right here. Edge loop complete. Delete that, and now we have an actual rough, but some sort of lip that goes over the skin. So we'd actually be seeing the thickness of this skin right here. This is the metal piece, maybe that's on top of the skin or embedded in the skin, whatever. And then from there, we could actually technically just. I don't think there's a way to cap in Zbrush, but we would just essentially start building now with that in that frame. We could start building this piece. What did I do there? Why does it look weird? I don't know. But yeah, so we can start building this. I'll turn this back on. We start building this piece now within that frame that we defined right there, and then we would technically just attach this piece in there as well. So roughly like that. Bring this in. Bring this in. And now we have unlimited depth because it doesn't really matter what we have here, as long as this would technically be connected, so it would be mobile enough to move walls attached to this. So we take something like that. Still have an attachment point. I'm not sure exactly what this would look like. This attachment point for the arm. I imagine it's something like kind of like when you like a camera. What do they call it? I forgot there's a word for it, but the camera, when you screw a camera lens in, I imagine it would be something like that, that threaded bit, something like that in there, that you would see in there. Actually, let me check. There's a group that's been doing that is like off the grids. It's the project is called Off the Grid. I think it's technically a, what do you call it, a movie or something that was made, or a short series or something like that, by the district, was it District 9? The District 9 director, the one that like Chappie and all that also. But there's a lot of good cybernetic and just kind of like cyberpunk pieces that the different artists did. There's a lot of good reference in that, but it's kind of pulling. They have a lot of cybernetic reference specifically, but there's one that does have like another kind of port like this, or does have a port that's like this, kind of like what we're doing here. So I do want to check on that, see how they're doing it. But yeah, no, it looks like it's something like a camera, like when you screw on a camera lens. It looks like that's a similar vibe. So probably what it would do for that, to make it a little cleaner too, we could probably go, let's put this in its own folder to keep it a little cleaner. And then insert sacrificial star, so little star, sacrifice it to initialize a cylinder. Wrong way. Not that it really matters. There you go. But let's be in the right direction anyway. So let's just get a cleaner little cylinder shape that this would connect to. Maybe, I think technically I would want it a little bit more inset, just because I'm thinking that like the actual pieces that are going to be moving the arm, whether it's hinging at the shoulder and things like that, may be connected to muscles and bone structure or whatever in here. But I'm thinking the actual pieces that are moving and doing the hinging are going to be on the actual Cyberarm itself. So we want the connection point to be a little bit more inset, because the piece where it actually is going to hinge is going to be probably a little bit about like right here, and that's going to be on the arm itself. So it should connect a little bit more internally, so something like in here that you screw in. Let's go ahead and fix this sketch we have up here. Reflect more of that. So we have this right here, just kind of fitting it onto this lip that we created. Lip though would need to be, yeah, like I said, it needs to be done in a different tool, because all this right here is, you know, is kind of messy. It's not actually following the topology the right way, or the flow of the topology. But for this piece, I think as long as we can kind of understand what's going on here, that's all we need at this point. So connection piece would be right here. Yeah, we want it to be inset, and then we can go ahead and do BZM, Shift F, so we can see what we're doing. We're going to inset a polygroup all like this. And then we're going to take this polygroup, we're going to extrude inward polygroup all. So that becomes a insert piece. And then actually, yeah, we'll do that again. Let's do insert polygroup all. Let's do, let's do extrude. Like that. And then we'll do inset again. I think there's a way to inset with this. Oh, weird. Okay. Anyway, so insert, extrude. Pretty sure there's a way to inset, extrude, and inset. You push in, but I don't know it. Okay, so something like that, and then let's do another inset and make this like a big inset. This will be the one we actually choose to make for the whole. Extrude like that. Cool. And we turn dynamic subdivision on. Always yes. It's fine. We have an actual piece here that we can kind of see to get an idea of what we're doing. Let's go ahead and do all of this. I'm going to insert edge loop. Oops, Shift F. Nope. That's not right. So we're going to do poly loop. Then insert poly loop. Insert poly loop for the poly loop. Not that way, that way. Yeah, cool. Cool. I slide? Is there a slide? Yeah, there's a slide. Slide. Edge loop complete. Slide this forward a little bit. Actually, slide this back a little bit. Cool. All right, and then we're going to extrude. Extrude. Poly loop again. Ooh, that's kind of cool though. That's what I want to do, but it's kind of cool. Some of those were kind of cool. Yeah, something like that. I'm thinking that maybe we would have if I do QMesh, let me just do auto groups. What is the poly group? Poly group, poly group by I think there's a way to do auto group by normals, polygroups, auto group by normals. Yeah, I don't like that actually. By edges, nope. By normals, nope. Front, nope. Auto group is going to turn it all the same. Yeah, okay, all right. No, we're just going to go ahead and let's do polygroup like that. That's cool. Okay, that's cool. We'll do that, and then we're going to go QMesh, polygroup all. Ooh. Interesting. No, polygroup island. There we go. Do want it on both sides. Nope. If I do this, I'll do local symmetry again, and then we're just gonna do transform as the, I believe. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Okay. So something like that. I want just to be like a little bit more. Like this is what's anchoring it in. Bevel this maybe. Edge loop complete. Go poly. Sure. That's gross because of they need to crease it. Crease edge loop complete. Crease. Yeah, there we go. Start to look better. Okay. Crease. No. That's fine. I don't need that to be creased. Oops. And then adding creases everywhere does not. Adding creases everywhere is not the right way to do this. It looks so bad. Alt. Def. I'm gonna see if I just Shift D, turn this off. Because that changes the whole thing. Let me just do a single poly edge or single edge. Boom. I don't need it to be pretty. I just need it to convey what I'm trying to convey. Okay, yeah, that works. Yeah, I'm okay with that. It doesn't need to be fancier than that. And it doesn't need to be that big either. Be a little bigger. Probably want to squish it just a little bit too. I think it's too long. Cool. Bigger. Jutting out a little too much. More inward. Yeah. And then maybe squish a little bit. Just to see. Okay. Alright. No, I kind of want to. I'd rather it be like that. Yeah, something like that. What is my dynamic perspectives on? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, yeah, something like that. Like have that interface in there, and then if we went here, we could start adding in. Let's just put some sculptures on. Maybe like insertion points for the different muscles. Like there's different, or maybe even down here it's like different cabling altogether because there's a decent amount of room right here. But you know, we have something like insertion points for different muscles. So like lats would connect somewhere around here. So maybe there's like here, down here is like a you know, insertion area for that. We have, you know, the back here, which is going to be like you know, back delt technically would come around here. Connect. There'd be another muscle down here for some more of your shoulder muscles. Up here for pec connections. Actually, all along here would be just pec. So maybe just some sort of loose insertion points for the muscles, the muscle system in this. That would attach to, you know, muscle system or whatever actuation you have on the arm. Maybe it converts it into like hydraulics or something like that. I'm not too sure. Some sci-fi stuff. Something like this. Just roughly, like, I would have to probably again sketch out some sort of, you know, interface point that I would like to have as like and I can reuse, because if I do one of these, then maybe it is just, maybe it's like, maybe muscle attachment points aren't just like one area. Muscle attachment points can be like multiple little grouping of fibers or that you're attaching to, so, or attaching to some sort of, you know, whatever actuation, something. Maybe it's like a bunch of little cartridges that you're attaching to, so instead of being like, you know, a big hole or something that you're inserting into, you're just actually inserting into a bunch of little holes or little you know, interfaces or something like that. We also would need something at the top here. Basically all this would just be a bunch of little weird little sci-fi interfaces. Maybe you would have specifically some like interfaces that are more like your rotator cuff, which would be like right around, I think right around here. Something maybe holding it in here. Something like this. Maybe the interface points aren't holes; they're like long slits. Ew, I don't like that. But maybe they're just kind of stacked, something like that, woven in like that. I don't know. This is an area that we play around with. Play around with a lot of the options that we can do here, because there's really not anything locked in at this point. Or it's just connecting down here for this latch here, or something like that. I don't know. I'd have to play around with this, and this is something that I think this is also one of the things that areas that if we lock it in once, we can actually reuse this in other spots, because it would be just kind of like a design language piece that would actually be something that you can use through the whole design. We can also, like I was saying earlier, kind of we can kind of technically bring the interface port out into the skin, so it would be an attached side instead of being completely interior. So we still have that lip for the for this piece that's on the inside and things like that. We can also bring in something that attaches out here on the bottom. I don't want to do it on the top. I've definitely decided that from a design standpoint. I don't want it to be on the top, but I don't mind if it attaches at the bottom a little bit, maybe over the lens like this. I think that could be interesting. Something right here. Yeah, I don't know, something like that. It's right now. It's just playing around with it. I do like the idea of it coming up like that. I don't know what this diagonal piece is. I like the idea of it coming up like that. Having some sort of attachment there. And then maybe bolts or something there. I don't know. Let's see. What about if I do like carve out like this? Like this is like somehow this is bolted in here, welded in like this. And then this is coming from the inside somehow. The hard part is that the weight paintings can definitely gonna have to be like very much like fixed up to make this work. But this part it's gonna be a lot of weight painting because it moves. But this part this area in deformation is fairly active in movement, so that's definitely a challenge that I knew that I would have coming into this, and something that I chose to proceed with anyway with this. I don't want this one to come on. Something that I chose to proceed with knowing this as well, that I would have to clean this up a lot. something like maybe over it. I do think maybe, I think that it makes sense that this would be almost BIN. Topology's getting rough here. So we're gonna just inflate it to give it a little more topology that we can play around with. But I do think that this is maybe like bolted in somehow to the skin. If something like that. There's some sort of lock into the skin of this piece. Maybe a little more subtle than that. I don't want it to be, this is supposed to be the base, so I don't want it to be super like bulky or noticeable. Shouldn't feel cheap, or it shouldn't feel like, yeah, it shouldn't feel like really run down. This should be just enough to hint at. And I think maybe that means that we need to take out the bolts piece maybe and just keep it subtly embedded into the skin, on top of the skin, just enough to know that, you know, something is there and it is integrated somehow, but not enough to actually feel like it's just like bolted in. So maybe we look at something like that. I like that. I think they make it a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. And then I think same deal for this guy right here. We can have. I'm okay with having 3 points of being embedded, but nah, I don't want too much. And have that. This basically all be one piece down here. Cool. So yeah. And then, yeah, because what we want for the full concept is that whenever, you know, if this piece is, if we raise up this arm right here, you know, if this arm gets raised up for whatever reason, in animation or whatever, that we have an underlying piece. And even if it doesn't get raised up, just if we want to also just take off the arm. When he doesn't have an arm, he shouldn't just be, you know, shouldn't just be, what the heck? Yeah, if he doesn't have an arm, he shouldn't just be like, shouldn't just be empty there. Which we probably would have, you know, so if he raises up his arm, you know, we'd probably have, let me actually raise his arm up at the shoulder is where it would raise up. This would deform though, so this top piece at least would be something like that. It would be like that. So this area underneath here though needs to have something in here to cover this hole that's made. I think it would basically, like, so at least we can see here we're covering up the hole of the we're covering up the hole of the initial cutoff point here, which is cool. This technically, this skin right here would be connected like that. The skin still would be connected like that. The plastic wouldn't though. Plastic's not gonna be connected, so it would be like that. The skin would stay connected, and the plastic wouldn't though move up. So anything underneath this piece, then we need to have a lip on both the here, and then underneath this piece we would need, which also makes me think that I need to probably be a little bit better about my, maybe even just raise the arms on these guys a little bit. But right here, that means that we are going to have to either have some sort of like, you know, leather piece again that's going to come here and stay connected like this. So instead of coming up, it would just connect like the skin on the bottom, which is doable, but I think isn't very cool. I think what's cooler is that if we have a defined lip along these edges, and then we have, you know, some sort of like cabling. So if we did something like this, we can go here. Let's use a sphere. Cool. Yeah, let's use a sphere. Boom, like this. So we can have internals. We have a little bit of internals and stuff like that if we want to. We could. That is definitely doable as well. So we have like a hinge or whatever we're using for the ball joint. Whatever we're doing for that, we could have that. That's definitely doable. We'd have to, you know, account for that. Or the other option is we just take this that we have here. We have here this, and basically make this a bunch of cabling, wires and whatever junk, whatever stuff we connected, and you know, right here, we just bring all those wires, those cables and things like that that are underneath, that are the internals of this system, and we just have it sit underneath here, so that whenever the arm gets raised, we have this structure underneath that it can display without showing like a big hole. And we don't need to define all of the internals, you know, completely. We just have, you know, just some simple geometry here that might even be just baked in as part of the model. We just have these cables that we just bake in to the mesh or whatever. Just simple geometry, like a very simple flat curved plane or whatever. We just bake in from the high poly this wiring. But we have all this wiring, we can just have it connect directly to this port. So we're showing the port, we're showing underneath, and we have this area that stretches in a, you know, realistic way. You know, based on the movement. So we have all this, and yeah, so it's visible here. I think works pretty well. Let me go ahead and just before we get too stuck on that, and then over here we can just move this in so we don't see it when it's at rest. And then let me just take this arm and duplicate it, and then we're gonna go ahead and change the arm. So this is a duplicate. Let's do arm. Change the name of this concept on your arm, raised, and then turn off the main arm. Take this. The pivot point's gonna be about right there, and then we just skin here would come up with, and you know, some of this are probably gonna have to, you know, move a little bit, even though it's not supposed to. That's you just, that kind of happens. Technically, only the skin should move, but realistically, like, some of it might have to, in order to make it work, might have to move as well. See, so it should bend about right. Let's say about right there. Like that. Like this. Like this. Yeah, so something like that. we'll take this down a little bit. Yeah, so that raises up, and then underneath we have all the cabling visible that's connecting to this interface port that we defined here. It's just kind of all going in there. And we have this, which is subtle and not like, you know, very noticeable. We have this subtle port that we have attached here, so it gives it a little bit of overlap to help tell that, you know, it's attached somehow here, but not too much. And even then we're probably going to change that also. But then if we need to turn off the arm for whatever reason, and we want to not have the full arm, but we want to not have the full arm in there, we just want him to be armless but still have a port like he is set up for cybernetics, then we can you know, actually have it right here. We may even, like, looking at it, I'm thinking maybe we should have a little bit more overlap, even if it kind of comes out underneath. I think actually we'd probably build, and we could also build this little bit of that skin. We could build that as part of, no, I don't like that. I like the ew. That looks kind of cool in a weird way. But yeah, so it's also, this works for dismemberment. Yeah. So we could have maybe a little bit more overlap, because it does look very clean cut right now. Maybe we have, like, also, I don't want it to interfere with the cybernetic either, though. It's just very clean, so I don't know. Maybe do something different on that. We'll see on that. But I like the direction. I think it's very straight right now, though, so that's probably the problem. Maybe take this and we just give it a little bit of a little shelf there. I don't know what exactly that is, but we just see the silhouette. Maybe it gets more interesting like that. We can do something that maybe we just bring it out a little bit more on top here. Not enough where it needs to connect, but just enough to make it interesting. Maybe it's this top piece. Even if we have the skin over in the main piece, maybe I think maybe we need some more, and yeah, so maybe we do something like adding some depth up here at the top. We can make this maybe all one piece, but this is just the delts, and all the delts are going to connect in this one piece that's just a little bit more defined, just a little bit more maybe not defined, but a little bit more forward, a little more jutting, I guess. Yeah, okay. Rough that back just a bit. You could also have, and there's gotta be, I think there's something to work in here with the having 3 muscle with the three delts. I think there's definitely some sort of design that we can work it with the three muscles there. Something like that. Maybe if I turn the arm back on, that piece. That's the raised arm. If I turn the regular one, that doesn't break that silhouette at all. So, yeah, okay. I don't hate that. So yeah, so maybe 3 things here. And I'm still thinking that maybe it's like a high frequency connection. I don't like. Something like that. Almost like hands. I don't know yet what that interface is going to look like, but I like that a little bit more. I do like the 3 big shapes. I know there's going to be more. I'm thinking the important cabling is going to come from down here somehow, like not just the muscle cable. Like there's like other cabling, like whatever's going to be the whatever's going to be the you know, fluids and different fluids and like the I don't know, like whatever magic stuff I have in this, something, it's going to come from down here. And I imagine there's the cables, yeah, like they're attaching down here too, because this is where the important cables are attaching. So maybe they even like maybe do something like this, and then that maybe, oh, maybe like this. Internal. This in. Something's attaching there. Attaching there. Comes up over the top like this. Okay, something like that. Maybe we go like this. Keep this on a separate, maybe this comes out a bit more. This is like a bird. No, I'm not seeing a bird. All that in. this really indented area. Well, I'm not too sure about that, but something there. I think I do like that it sticks out more. I think that does help sell the illusion of it just not being like a straight cut off. And then, you know, turn the arm back on. The arm back on, and yeah. We got this raised up, things connect under there to the port. The port is connected somewhere around right in there. About right here, I guess. Somewhere there. That's where the hinges are. Whatever. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, cool. Alright, well, good enough for tonight. Cool. Not too much progress, just trying out some Zbrush stuff. It's been a little bit. But yeah, this is just a chill one. Didn't have a full, didn't have something like a drawing where we're gonna have something complete by the end. This was just a continuing process. Something I've been working on for a hot sec. But yeah, just a chill one. Cool that I got the music working. That's was something I wanted to get done. But yeah, other than that, this is the arm. I'll keep updates in the Discord to follow along with this. Definitely got to push this a little bit further now that we've got some other things in place. But yeah, other than that, that's what we have right now. A little bit of progress, not too much. But yeah, we'll hopefully get this a little more defined, and then we can get some Unreal tests started up soon. But yeah, that should be it for tonight. Yeah, see you guys.